Oh, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Silver Tent TV. I'm Siobhan A Riordan, I'm your host. Elsa's in the background. She may occasionally join in, just to warn you. I'm delighted to welcome here today two remarkable people, one of whom many of you that are in the Silver Tent will already know, Resa Ferreira, who is our storyteller. She holds the frequency in the tent. If you had to name someone in the tent that everybody loves, it would be Resa. Today, we've been joined by a very remarkable man. They say behind every amazing, extraordinary woman, there's often a remarkable man. And we have that here today with Steve. So I want to begin by saying a very warm welcome to you both.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So the Silver Tent is a global online community of over 6,000 women. And we also meet offline in our own various neighbourhoods, communities across the world. And we're here to support women over 50 to embrace their wild, wonderful selves. Resa has been in the tent, I think, pretty much since inception. Would I be right there, Resa?
Just about.
Yeah. And I've been in the tent 6 months after it started. So I've known Resa for a long time now. I joined her in her storytelling circles. And so a profound storyteller and also creating the space for all of us to tell stories together. And as I got to know Resa, this remarkable soul, every now and again she kept mentioning Steve. And whenever she did...
Ears were burning.
Yeah. Yes. And whenever she did, she mentioned, I just felt such love emanating from that connection. And I thought, I want to meet this guy. I want to know this guy. And that got me then thinking about the men of the tent. So this is going to be a series of interviews with the men of the tent, the ones in the background that are there supporting our Silver Sisters to embrace their wild, wonderful, wise selves. So I wanted to begin, Resa, really for you to tell us a little bit first about your story of being in the tent.
I had such an interesting connection. Someone connected me to Mary London, and Mary is the one who told me about the Silver Tent. So, she opened a whole world to me with her Dare to Blossom rediscovery cards. And then when she said the Silver Tent, I was so thirsty for the interaction and the communion of women. And I didn't really have a physical community. I had tried and had some fail forwards of women's groups after I moved out here to Connecticut. And when I found the Silver Tent, I remember saying to my husband, I found something. And he was so excited
Yes.
because he has a strong network of men's group and wanted the same for me. And we had both shared that in Arizona when we lived there. So this became such a direct line of nurturing for me and a place to actually talk to women without having to explain what I was talking about, which was great. And women all going through the same things, postmenopausal over here, and he was like, yay, I don't have to listen to that all anymore. She's talking to other women, because the poor guy would go, yeah, okay. He was always very supportive, but the other part was the whole community experience of celebrating and giving nourishment to women who are stepping out into something they may have denied themselves all their lives. Mm-hmm. And in this new age of coming into this crone wisdom, to be able to say, this is me and this is what today my mission is. And have all these women say, yes, yay, go for it, and know that if you really become troubled, you can say, I need some support, or you can reach to specific people and ask questions. And that's just something you don't find very often.
Mm. Yes.
Beautiful. Now you know why we love her so much, Steve. So, Steve, it would be good to hear from you. You've seen Resa on her journey through the Silver Tent. What have you observed?
I've observed a blossoming, and it wouldn't be the first time. I've watched Resa grow more and more into herself. That's kind of the phrase I use, becoming herself more and more. And there's something that's happened because of the Silver Tent and because of women, around the same age, and yet all these different experiences. And I just watch her grow more and more and share her gifts, which to me was really important because I know how gifted she is. And we both have been on this journey of me with men and she with women. It's just seemed a little more difficult for her until she connected with the Silver Tent since we moved back to Connecticut. So, yeah.
Now, your teacher gave you the names Sister Moon and Brother Sun. Do you want to share a bit with us about those names and what they mean to you both?
Well, actually, someone started calling us that. I'm not so sure. We were performing in Arizona. We used our own names when we performed in New England and around the country. But when we moved to Arizona, someone said, "Oh, it's just like that old movie, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon."
It was Sarah.
It was Sarah.
It was Sarah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
she said to us, and she used to invite us to this circle she had on New Moon to tell stories, and
Yes.
Nobody really knew what to make of it because she was introducing something new, to have people come as storytellers who really told stories of spirit and that type of thing. So she gave us a perfect opportunity, and so
it just kind of stuck. It's what we were being called, and then we started using it as a name. So,
and
yes.
She also had, Sarah was the wise woman, so she had this view into the future. When we left Arizona 9 years ago, she was dying, and she said to us, so the mission that I give you is that at some point you have to bring men and women together. And you have to have the circles for the men, the circles for the women, and then the circle where they come together. And she did a rebirthing process for women that was 9 months called Sister Moon. Yeah. And so we have talked about a rebirthing process for men called Brother Sun. And then when you bring them together, they would be Brother Sun and Sister Moon. And it would, so that men and women could come to dialogue without the dynamic that often happens with men and women in a circle, where domination and subject, there's that energy that comes out of our society that comes into the circle. But when people have already processed outside of being together and then come together, they have the chance to make that circle a firm union.
It's really interesting. We were talking with our youngest son yesterday, and he's a personal trainer, owns a studio, a cardio workout studio, kickboxing. And he originally started with men and women, but he really started going a particular way because so many young women were coming. And he realized the dynamic of men being in the room, and how often, so often happens is men start showing off and they're doing all these physical things, and it was taking away from the women. And so he decided to start going more towards letting the women be themselves and having less of that with men. He said, maybe someday I'll have one that's all together, but right now this seems to be the way it's going. And somehow for men and women to be able to come together without that particular dynamic, that's something that takes, I think, concentration and love and caring.
It's interesting you say that. I used to, I was the founder of the first postgraduate program in women's leadership in the UK. And I was invited to work in police services. And initially I was invited to work training policewomen and senior police officers. And and one of the senior police officers said to me, look, why do you just do this for women? Why don't you do it for men as well? And so I said, okay, I'll try it. I've never done a mixed group before. I'll try it. Never, ever, ever again. I learned my lesson very painfully. And what I concluded was that to really explore your leadership, you have to own your vulnerability. And men just weren't willing to go there when there were women in that space. And women need to speak their voice, and the women just weren't willing to go there when there were men in the space. So I completely understand that. I love what you said, Steve, about your being involved in men's groups. And I want just to share a little bit with us about what that gives you and why you think men's groups are as important as women's groups.
I think each gender needs the space, ritual space, sacred space, to share together and push their boundaries a little, sometimes more than a little. And it's hard, as we just spoke, for men and women to do that together. And the real discovery happens when men, for men, to together find a place where they can be vulnerable and trust one another. And I, particularly myself, I found that in a particular group of men that I belong to, a men's group. And I just feel that we're in the space of men and women evolving. And when it's done politically, when it's done religiously, somehow all the old stuff gets thrown into the mix and makes it more difficult. I think it's time for a new kind of direction and attempt with compassion and trust and love and understanding. And I could start that because I found a group of men that were willing to do that. And I see that for Resa, for her. So we together, as a couple, as partners in life, talk about this kind of thing all the time. I mean, it just comes up. I don't care what time of day it is. I don't care if it's a morning or evening. And it comes up and we kind of pursue it, push it, and see where it's going.
We talk about taking gender out of it and making it the divine. Yeah. So in a spirit-based piece, because when people say masculine or feminine or men or women, there are preconceived ideas that just flow out, and things that we may not even own anymore, but are habitual because of society, right, or whatever our family structure was. So when you take that into the divine, you're taking the energetics of each, and you see them as a whole. And if you think of it like a caduceus, and that center part being spirit, and the caduceus forming of the two different realms of energy,
the weaving, two snakes,
then you have these, you see that neither is dominant, neither is subjected, each is equal, and both of them together form the strength that surrounds the spirit of the center. And so we come together and we can dance that dance with each other and make a whole that then arcs out into the world. And so it no longer is about him being male by gender or me female by gender or the transgender or anything. It's about the divinity of each of the energetics and how each is housed within us and how we live that. And it becomes a whole different walk with each other when it's that way.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that to me, because when I was reliving the police experience, I had the same conversation in my head. Are there spaces where men and women can be together? And I was reminded I had the honor and the privilege to be part of a ayahuasca religious community. And I used to go for ceremony twice a week for about 6 months. And we had the men on one side of the room and the women on the other side of the room. And we would be in ceremony from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon till about 4 o'clock in the morning, a kind of 12-hour ceremony. And that division was beautiful. And ayahuasca, obviously such an individual journey between you and the beautiful medicine of that plant, that sacred plant. But I remember at 4:00 in the morning when the ceremony would end and we would eat, and food just tastes amazing after that kind of experience. There was such a union, and gender was gone. There was just that divine experience and souls meeting in kind of repose from that incredible journey. So yes, I think it is seeking out those spaces of the divine, of the sacred, where we can really bring those, where gender becomes almost meaningless.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful place for us to end on, I think. I feel like we're beginning something here, because I think there's so much more for us to say, and I would love to hear so much more from Sister Moon and Brother Sun, especially stories. So shall we make a date for another time to come together and carry on this conversation?
I'd be honored.
It's been beautiful being with you both. I really do feel the love, and it's a joy to witness. I thank you both.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Have a beautiful day, evening, whatever time is left in your time zone. And thank you for joining us for Silver Tank TV. This is Siobhan A Riordan signing out.